Thank you, Bob. Certainly one of my favorite patriotic hymns, and I appreciate you sharing with us that message and music. Today, I make no apology whatsoever for being a red-blooded, flag-waving American patriot. I believe it is logical. I believe it is reasonable. I believe it is biblical to be patriotic. Shortly after we moved into our home on 1809 St. Joseph Street, one thing has always been found flying free off the front of my home. Now, sure, I can fly that flag during special occasions, and one thing that I see now on the side of the church, that symbol of our country. I take great pride every time I unfurl that flag and place it in the standard off of my porch and give God thanks for the opportunity to live in this great nation of ours. A roving reporter came up to a man on the street one day and he said, "Do you know what the two biggest problems in America are?" The pedestrian said, "I don't know, and I don't care." The reporter said, "Congratulations, you got them both." It does seem that the two biggest problems in our country, number one is ignorance and number two is apathy. People don't know, and unfortunately they don't care. And we have people today who think, well, you're not supposed to be patriotic. Somehow everything's just supposed to be one big globe, one world. Somehow if we're patriotic, that's almost un-Christ-like. And I believe that's the most ridiculous thing of all. You see, the truth is, when I tell people that I love my country, that doesn't mean that I hate all others. When I want God to bless America, that doesn't mean that I don't want other countries to be blessed. It just means that America is my fatherland. This is the land of my birth. This is the land of my loyalty and the land of my responsibility. I love all people, but I know that one day I'm going to have to stand for God, before God, and give an account for myself. And so I've got to look out and make certain that I'm right with God. Because I can't answer for you, and you can't answer for me. I know that I must do everything that I can to make my life and my country better. The truth is, yesterday we celebrated a document. A document. The Day of Independence, and Independence Day represents that moment in time in our nation's history when a document was forged that many of us have never read. Very few Americans know even the first line of the Declaration of Independence. But we know that on or about that day, in 1776, there was on paper these words: when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whatever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Now that is in part the words of that document. And when that document was handed to John Hancock, and many of you have seen a replica, perhaps even the exact document as best as we could find it, with that big signature on the bottom, John Hancock says, I want to make sure that the king himself sees my name first. I still get a lump in my throat when we pledge allegiance to the flag. Today I share with you a message entitled, One Nation Under God. In the correct English, we are quick to be pointing to that phrase which has no comma. In other words, when we say that phrase, we don't pause between one nation under God, as we were so well taught by Mrs. Ruth Walker. There is no pause because there is no comma. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I still don't mind getting a little wet in the corner of my eye when we sing the Star-Spangled Banner. I hope I never grow cold or indifferent about these things. I say it because I really believe it. We live in the greatest nation on earth. Amen. Now, when I say that, I'm not putting down other nations. But within me, I find a great deal of pride. Within me, I find a great deal of hope, knowing that that nation should always remain under God. William Barclay, a great theologian, once wrote this: nonetheless, it remains true that in the life of the Christian, God has the last word and not the state. The Christian is at once the servant and the conscience of the state. Just because he is the best citizen, he must also refuse to do what a Christian citizen cannot do. What a difficult position that sometimes puts us in. It isn't always easy to be a Christian in these United States. We love our country. And when we sing those words, oh beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain, when we see the stars and stripes flying high in the crowd, when we say the Pledge of Allegiance of the United States, very few of us have to fake the feelings of patriotism that well up within our hearts. But it is exactly as Christians that we must never forget that it is God, and not any nation, that has the last word. All nations, including the United States, are subject to God's divine authority and power and law, and every nation, including ours, must come under the judgment of a higher law and a higher power. Christians are to be the best citizens. Indeed, true Christian patriotism may well mean going against the popular thinking to stand up for the unpopular but just cause. It may well mean taking the risk of being the moral conscience of the nation, at the risk of the disfavor of our fellow citizens. As we seek in our own way and with our own best judgment to make our country a better place. Yet this is our calling as Christians, that if we are true patriots and lovers of our God and country, we live out those words that were spoken, "He loves his country best, who strives to make it best." Most of the time, in loving and being loyal to our country, we also can love God. But there are times, excruciating times, when we cannot both love God and agree with or obey what goes on in our country. If our country is doing things with which we cannot morally agree. It is in this tension that Christians have been forced to live their lives for centuries all over the world, beginning with the earliest Christians in Judea and the larger Roman Empire. To be a Christian in those years was a dangerous thing. We like to think that those days are over, but that is not the case. This very moment, I am certain, somewhere in this world, someone is suffering persecution by their government or by their fellow citizens on behalf of their faith in Christ. We would like to think that, as Americans, that will never happen to us. We are truly privileged to live in one of the most democratic and freest nations that have ever existed. But our country is not perfect. History teaches us that occasions will continue to arise where, to obey our Christian conscience and the cause of Christ, we may be forced to oppose the policies and laws of our own nation in favor of a change or improvement. We as Christians wholeheartedly and gladly join together, celebrating the ideals of our nation, her history, her past, her present, her future. At the same time, we recognize that our faith in God, the God who made the heaven and the earth, and who is Lord over all nations, calls us to seek to improve our nation and to hold it to its highest ideals. At the same time, we are called as well to extend our love and care to the whole world, because we worship a God whose deep love is universally extended to all peoples and all creatures. As I sat at my desk and typed out those words, there was one thing that came to the forefront of my mind. And though there are no points, if you will, to my message to you this morning, though there is no symbolic outline for you to carry away with you this morning, I share with you from the top and the bottom of my heart, we have the opportunity to make our nation better. At every turn, at every situation that we find ourselves as a country wandering away from God, it is your responsibility and my responsibility to remind all of us we are one nation under God. And though there are the folks out there that don't even believe in God, I give them all of the opportunities in the world not to believe. To those who choose a different faith other than the Christian faith, I give them all of the opportunities to worship God as they see fit. As a follower of Christ, it is my hope that all people will come to the knowledge, the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But I know that won't happen. I know that to be a good citizen of these United States, I must look at every person, at every individual, and love them. Regardless of their religion, regardless of their race, regardless of their orientation, we are called to love. That, my friends, is what sets us apart from other groups. Groups that would rather show hate than love. Groups that would rather execute a person for not believing the way they do. See, what makes us different is love. What makes us unique is love. See, all throughout the history of the world, regardless of what nation there was occupying whatever part of the world, whatever empire was in poise to take over land, there was always one thing that remained constant. And that was the love of Christ. I close simply with this. Many of us remember that moment when Jesus Christ was standing before Pontius Pilate. How many of you remember that moment? Not personally. I know some of you might have been a little late in getting there, but what was it one person said? I wasn't there when they made dirt, but I was there when they delivered it. At that particular moment, the government asked Jesus, "What is truth? Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said something very simple, and I hope that we will walk away this morning. Remember these words. Remember these words, because as much as I love being American, I realize being a Christian is the most important title that I carry with me. Because Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." We are given the opportunity to live in these United States, but let me remind you that the true kingdom, the true leader, the true head of who we are is not of this world. We recognize that our faith in God, the God who made heaven and earth, and who is Lord over all nations, calls us to seek to improve our nation and to hold it to its highest ideals. This is the true patriotism to which Christ calls all of us.